The night the police closed the case, John Mercer sat alone in his daughter's room, the silence pressing against him like a weight he couldn't lift. The walls were still covered with the faint traces of her life. Photographs of friends tacked above the desk, a half-read novel on the nightstand, and a pale pink sweater draped over the chair where she used to sit to braid her hair. The faint scent of her perfume still lingered in the air, haunting him more than any memory. The detectives had left hours ago, offering their hollow sympathies, their tired promises that they would keep an eye out for new leads. But John saw the truth in their eyes. They had moved on. To them, she was another name in a file. To him, she was everything. 2 months earlier, his daughter, Emily, had been found at the edge of a wooded trail just outside town, her body broken, her smile extinguished. She'd been out with friends, celebrating her acceptance into university, and never came home. They found her phone in a ditch and her necklace caught in a thorn bush. There were no witnesses, no usable DNA, no arrests. John had been a construction foreman for 20 years, a man used to solving problems with his hands. He wasn't a detective, but he knew when someone was lying, and the police had stopped trying. When the lead investigator told him there was nothing more to be done, something inside John snapped quietly, cleanly, like a wire pulled too tight. For days, he barely spoke. He'd wake up, go to her room, sit in the chair, and stare out the window at the street she used to walk. But as grief hardened into something sharper, he began to notice things, tiny details that others had missed. The local paper mentioned that a white pickup truck had been seen near the trailhead that night. A neighbor recalled seeing the same truck parked outside the corner bar a few nights later. John started spending his evenings at that bar, nursing one drink for hours, his eyes moving from one face to another, waiting. He spoke little, but he listened, to rumors, to gossip, to the careless things men said when they thought no one cared. It took 3 weeks before he heard a name that made his heart seize. Kyle Rennick, a mechanic known for drinking too much, getting into fights, and disappearing for days at a time. He'd been questioned by police and released. No evidence, they said. But John knew the type. He'd seen men like that on job sites his whole life. Cruel when drunk, smug when sober, always certain they'd get away with it. John began to follow him. He learned where Kyle worked, when he left, where he drank. He learned the color of his girlfriend's car, the way he smoked on his porch when the sun went down. It was a strange, cold comfort, knowing the man who had stolen his light was out there, living like nothing had happened. Each observation fed the storm inside him, but also gave him purpose. He stopped shaving, stopped going to work. His coworkers stopped calling. He sold his truck for cash, bought an old sedan, and tinted the windows. He bought a camera, a pair of binoculars, and a small voice recorder. Night after night, he collected details, piecing together Kyle's routines with the precision of a hunter. He told himself he was just gathering evidence, that he'd hand it all over to the police once he had enough. But as the weeks turned into months, he realized he no longer believed in justice as they defined it. Emily's face haunted his dreams, her laughter echoing in the quiet hours before dawn. He'd wake with his fists clenched, whispering promises into the dark. Then, one night, he saw it, Kyle in the parking lot behind the bar, shoving a girl against his truck, laughing when she screamed. John's vision went white-hot. Before he knew what he was doing, he was out of the car, the crowbar from his trunk in his hand. He moved like something no longer entirely human, silent, focused, unstoppable. The sound of metal striking bone echoed through the empty lot. The girl ran, screaming for help. Kyle fell, tried to crawl, and John hit him again. And again. Until there was nothing left but the thud of his heartbeat and the taste of blood in the air. When he finally stopped, he stood there for a long moment, his breath ragged, his body trembling. The crowbar slipped from his hand and clattered to the ground. He looked down at what he'd done, and for the first time since Emily's death, he felt something that wasn't grief. It wasn't peace either. It was silence. He left the body there, walked back to his car, and drove to the river. He threw the crowbar into the dark water and watched it vanish without a ripple. Then he drove home, stripped off his blood-stained clothes, and burned them in a metal barrel behind his house. When the news broke the next morning, local mechanic found dead in bar lot. The town buzzed with theories. Gang violence. A robbery gone wrong. The police reopened Emily's case briefly, wondering if the two were connected, but again found no leads. John never spoke of it. He sold his house, packed a few things, and left town. People said he couldn't bear to live there anymore, that the memories were too much. No one knew that somewhere in a small storage unit outside the city, there was a box containing photos, notes, and a necklace, the one they'd found tangled in the thorn bush, all sealed away like the pieces of a life he could never rebuild. He didn't see himself as a hero. He didn't even see himself as a father anymore. Just a man who had kept a promise when no one else would. And in the quiet hours of the night, when the world was still, he'd sometimes think of Emily's laughter and whisper into the darkness, "It's done, sweetheart. You can rest now." But the truth was he never could. Years passed, but time did little to dull the ache. John Mercer lived quietly, moving from town to town, working odd jobs under different names. He avoided people, never staying anywhere long enough to make friends. He'd rent a small apartment, keep to himself, and leave once the faces around him began to look too familiar. He'd convinced himself that isolation was punishment, and in some ways, absolution. But the thing about vengeance is that it doesn't end with the act. It lingers, festers, and whispers in your ear when you think you've outrun it. One winter, nearly 5 years after Kyle Rennick's death, John found himself working as a night guard at a warehouse on the outskirts of Chicago. It was quiet work, just how he liked it. But one night, during his rounds, he caught sight of a teenage girl in the alley behind the loading bay. She was crying, bruised, clutching her arm. He approached carefully, speaking in a soft tone that surprised even him. She flinched when he got close. When she finally spoke, her story came out in fragments: an abusive boyfriend, threats, a fear of going to the police. John listened, the words digging into old scars. He offered her his jacket, some food, and a place to rest until morning. She hesitated, then nodded. As they sat in the break room, the flickering fluorescent light above them buzzing like a tired fly, she said something that sent a chill down his spine. "They won't help," she whispered. "Cops don't care about girls like me." John stared at her, and for a moment, he wasn't in that warehouse anymore. He was back in his daughter's room, the air heavy with silence, the police shaking their heads. He saw Emily in that girl's face, the same fear, the same desperate hope that someone, anyone, might care enough to fight for her. That night changed him again. He didn't hunt anymore, not the way he had before, but something inside him shifted. He began keeping an eye out for girls who came to the warehouse late at night, workers from nearby factories, runaways who slept in the alleys. He'd leave food where they'd find it, call in anonymous tips when he saw trouble brewing. The staff thought he was strange, maybe even dangerous. He didn't care. In the months that followed, the city's underbelly began to take notice. A few men who preyed on vulnerable women, pimps, dealers, abusers, vanished quietly, their cars found abandoned, their apartments empty. No one ever connected the disappearances. But the rumor spread. Someone was watching. Someone who didn't call the cops. Someone who handled things. John never confirmed it, never denied it. One night, a detective showed up at his building, a woman named Claire Donovan, sharp-eyed and patient. She asked about his past, about the places he'd worked, about the missing men. He deflected her questions with weary calm. She left her card on his table and said, "You can't carry the world on your back, Mr. Mercer. It'll break you." He didn't reply, but her words lingered long after she was gone. That winter, a blizzard hit the city. John found himself patrolling the frozen streets, checking on the homeless who took shelter under bridges. Near the train yard, he found another girl, younger this time, maybe 16, unconscious from the cold. He carried her to his car and drove to the nearest hospital, sitting outside until he saw the nurses rush to her aid. As he watched through the glass doors, he caught his reflection in the window, the deep lines in his face, the gray in his beard, the weariness that had settled into his bones. For the first time in years, he thought of his daughter not as she had died, but as she had lived, smiling, running, dreaming. He realized then that his vengeance hadn't brought her back. It had only kept him chained to the night she was taken. The next morning, he packed a small bag, drove out of the city, and headed north. He found a small cabin by a lake, quiet, forgotten, just like him. The local hardware store owner didn't ask questions when he paid in cash. John spent his days repairing the place, chopping wood, fishing at dawn. Sometimes he'd find letters in his mailbox, all unsigned, written in a steady hand. They came from Detective Donovan. She never accused him of anything directly, but her words carried understanding. "You've done what you thought was right," one note read. "Maybe now it's time to forgive yourself." He never wrote back, but he kept every letter. Years later, an old man walking his dog by the lake found John's cabin empty. On the table sat a single photograph, Emily at age 10, grinning, holding a fishing rod. Next to it, a folded note. "I couldn't save you, sweetheart, but I saved what I could of the world that failed you. I'm tired now. I'm coming home." They buried him beside his daughter in the small town he'd once fled, under an oak tree that bloomed pink every spring. No one knew the full truth of what he had done, or how many lives he had touched in his quiet war. But every so often, someone passing by the graveyard would swear they heard a man's voice in the wind, low, steady, full of love and sorrow, whispering, "Rest easy, kiddo. I've got you."